So I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while, especially lately. We live in very unique times. I remember when, those of you who remember Dr. Kish, when he was here maybe 25 years ago, he had a sermon here, and I remember he said once, he goes, the young people today, they live in different times. He goes, when I was young, the biggest temptation for me was a pile of hay in my village. But what young people are facing today is completely different because everything is changing. And culture today is changing faster than ever. And with culture society. One of the main reasons for change in culture is technology. People don't understand that sexual revolution would never be possible without technology of contraception. And if you look how through the history everything changed, it was technology. When they invented, printing press, we started having books in bigger numbers. So technology is one of the biggest drivers in change of culture and society. The problem today is that technology is changing so fast that nobody can catch up with it. So we live in a time when technology is in control. We are not. We are creating technology, but technology is in control. So what kind of culture do we live in? So my introduction is going to be maybe a bit longer. Culture today. Okay. We live in postmodern, and I'm talking mainly about West culture today, Western culture, and maybe more specifically North American culture where we are. So it's postmodern and post-Christian culture we live in. We went from truth to utility. In most of our culture today, what matters most is not whether something is true or meaningful, but whether something is useful to us. That's the thinking today. We live in very individualistic culture that is very self-centered. My grandmother, she didn't have a phone. She knew what camera was. If she would resurrect today, she would have no clue what selfie is. So that's how much everything changed. I showed, I think, Philip once the picture of the old phones where you would do the numbers like this, and I'm not sure that young people today would know how to use it. And that's only 20, 30 years, how everything changed. Individualism. Entertainment is more important than depth today. Culture today is saturated with distractions. Streaming platforms, social media, consumer goods, and we are constantly stimulated by what's being offered to us. The goal is not significance in life, it's amusement. We want to be amused. We want to be entertained. We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and this goes back to the technology that we mentioned, and thereafter our tools shape us. This is Neil Postman. We live, postmodern culture is a culture of relativism and pluralism. See, there is no more objective truth. What you think is true and what I think is true is completely arbitrary. I have my truth, you have your own truth, and nobody can judge who's right, who's wrong. That's today's society. That's today's culture. Meaning becomes optional. Everything is subjective. Neil Postman, He also said modern culture is less in danger of Orwell's repression, if you know his book 1984, where he believed that it's going to be repression that's going to be used to control us. Repression of truth, then Huxley is drowning in amusement. Truth and meaning are not banned. They're not forbidden. They're simply ignored. This is Viktor Frankl. He said this: when a person can't find deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasures. And our culture, our society today is hedonistic culture, pleasure. Pleasure is the ultimate. We are dopamine culture, adrenaline culture. If we don't have dopamine, we have to do something immediately to make sure that we have it again. We are, culture of consumption. See, it's all about us, and we use everything around us, for us. We consume everything. It thrives on novelty and desire, not necessarily on the meaning. I need new things to entertain me, to give me more dopamine, to give me more pleasure. And even identity, who we are, how we perceive who we are, is very much defined by what we consume. I'll identify with you by what you can consume, how much you can consume, what you can afford to consume, and what kind of stuff you consume, and what kind of experiences you create for yourself in life. Then I'm going to tribe myself to you, align myself with you. Even meaning is, somebody say, commodified. We buy meaning. There is no meaning, something that's higher than us, that transcends that. Meaning is in things that we acquire. I'm going to go and buy myself a car. Girls are going to go shopping, and that's going to make us happy. That's going to give us dopamine and so on. The irony of choices. We have so much choice. When it comes to important stuff, we don't have much choice. But when it comes to unimportant stuff, you have, when you go to cereal section, you have like lots of cereal. But important stuff, you don't have, that's being shrunk more and more. The abundance of choice itself makes meaning feel less urgent. We have so much choice. Why do I, why anchor myself to something, I'd rather endlessly drift from novelty to novelty, from one new thing to another one. New excitement, new feeling, new dopamine. Then you have, we talked about postmodernism. Now we have even more. You have transgenderism. And Canada is at the forefront of it. And what is transgenderism? Transgenderism is believed that one's inner identity, psychological self is more real and authoritative than biological body. You can call yourself pretty much whatever you want. And some even think that this is not politically correct to mention this in church. I don't think so, because this is a moral issue. Big moral issue. Transhumanism. What is transhumanism? There's a big push for transhumanism. They're saying that's the next revolution that we'll have. We are an animal that will be transcended. And technology offers the pathway to that act of transcendence. Through technology, we are going to become something else. We came where we came. We are at level where we are evolutionary. Evolution brought us only this far. And now we are going to become something more, transhuman, beyond what we are. Something more, something better through technology. That's the next trend. Then you have woke culture. What is a woke culture? You hear about that? Some people, know what it is, some don't. But I'm going to use one guy that, is authority on this topic. He goes, the modern self is psychological, defined by inward feelings, desires, and sense of personal authenticity. What it means, if you see me and you see that I'm male in my 50s, and you think that's how I should perceive myself, but I tell you no. I feel like a cat, and you laugh. But see, that's not laughing matter anymore. See, that's reality these days. And you'll see why is this important. Because why we think it's not big deal anymore, you'll see why it is. Sexual and cultural revolution. See, Truman, in one of his books, he says this, the sexual revolution is not just about new behaviors. Before, when you read about something that's immoral sexually, you talked about acts that are not good. These days, when you talk about that, you're not talking about acts, you're talking about desires, how people perceive themselves. He goes, it's not just about new behaviors, but about a new view of what it means to be human. See, we are redefining what it means to be human. And maybe we sit in churches and think, well, what's that got to do with me? We'll see what's connection between us and that. See, if identity is psychological and sexual desire is central to psychology, then sexual expression becomes fundamental right. You know, I was shocked. I saw a few clips of people when somebody told them, if they say, for example, they are something that they are not, and somebody else objects, people get very aggressive. They get very offended. And I was thinking, like, why? Okay, you disagree, but why so much aggression? Why so much rage? This is why. The modern self interprets harm as psychological injury, offense, lack of affirmation, and rejection. See, that actually explains why people feel abused when you disagree with them on this issue. They feel like you punch them in the face because the harm is redefined today. Disagreement on these issues is perceived as violence, not as disagreement. As violence. That's why you get that kind of reaction. Why is this important? This is not the main reason why it's important, but we'll see how this works. There are 4 phases of implementation of how this works in culture. And what I'm giving you here is not written mostly by Christian authors. This is written by secular people who study society and culture and sociology. And Canadian Charles Taylor is one of the most prominent guys in this sphere in the world, actually. There are 4 phases. Mandatory tolerance. When an idea appears, we are all supposed to tolerate it. And we as Christians, usually we don't have a problem tolerating different ideas, different worldviews. I don't. Everybody has a right to their own idea and their own view. Then you have mandatory acceptance. That's the second stage. Then it's not anymore just required of me to tolerate, but now it's required for me to accept it as a norm, as a normal. And you have institutions who are used to make sure that this happens. You know, somebody said that public education does not educate public anymore. It creates public. Mandatory acceptance. Mandatory celebration. Tolerance, mandatory tolerance. Mandatory acceptance, then mandatory celebration. I don't need to celebrate somebody else's view. I have my own views. You'll say it's not mandatory. Who says it's mandatory? Nobody's forcing you. Well, is it? Mandatory participation. And you'll say, what's that got to do with me? Well, I want to tell you, and you know, I told you this story. A friend of mine, she teaches at well-known university in the United States. She almost lost her job because she did not recognize any more sexes than male and female, biblically. It became such a big deal that federal government got involved, that celebrities got involved. It became such a big deal that she, as a Christian, got support from Richard Dawkins, who is the famous anti-Christian guy who believed that she had the right to believe what she believed and nobody should force her. See, it became mandatory. It became mandatory. She almost lost her job. Why did I go through all of this? Because many times we can think, okay, that's them. That's their culture. That's how they live. But we are, kako mi kažemo, to je svet, a mi smo ostatak. Like, this is them. We live our lives. What do we have to do with that? Now I want to see where we are as individuals in church in relation to culture. Where we are. How we function. How much did culture influence us as individuals and as a church? What do you think? Are we immune? How much are we immune? Let's look at some things. And I'm going to go through some things fast because I don't want to have a hostage situation. Because the last part of sermon is actually the most important. And I want you to be awake for that. Now, if you want to take a nap, that's fine. Church as a product. Churches can be treated like service providers where members come and act as consumers. Remember we said consumer culture outside? But we can have the same culture inside the church. You know, you came here and I'm preparing sermon, I'm thinking, what do I have to do for these people so they stay awake and they get encouraged and they, you know, maybe get inspired to change or do something better in their life? How can I amuse you? How can I arouse your interest? What would be a good sermon in time of Martin Luther and what would be a good sermon for you today? What do you think? In times of Martin Luther, the good sermon would have to have one ingredient, that it's true. Today, no, that's not enough. I have to tell you jokes. I have to entertain you so you don't fall asleep. And then if you don't like, you know, how somebody looked at you, don't like the song that we sang, you know, so we come to consume. Or do we? People shop around for churches that fits best their, you know, preferences, preaching style, music programs, or amenities, you know. I come here, I don't like this church. I come here and Milan didn't say hi to me. Well, next Saturday I'm somewhere else. Or I'm nowhere. But I still claim to be a Christian. We have lots of people maybe who are watching who are sitting home, post-COVID. You know, if you're a Christian, you're supposed to be in church. Not just to be. You're supposed to be here and serve and contribute. Not to consume, but to give. And why I'm saying this is very important for young people. Because in this time and age, you need this kind of people in order for church to survive. Success in church gets measured by numbers, facilities, customer satisfaction, you know, rather than spiritual growth and discipleship. Faith is personal consumption. How about faith? You know, we say we have faith. The world doesn't have faith, but we have faith. And that's the difference between them and us. But is there a much difference? Instead of self-denial and cross-bearing, Christianity becomes about, what do I get out of it? I come to church, I come to God, but what do I get out of it? Worship is approached as entertainment or emotional uplift, not primarily time when I'll encounter the Holy God. Sermons have to be like TED Talks. Style, relevance, novelty, it has to be new. Every side is something new. That's important. That's more important than, maybe truth and faithfulness. Maybe we don't fit in this, but I'm just telling you what other churches are doing out there. So we are aware. Awareness is very good. Programs over discipleships. Churches may focus on offering wide menu of programs, youth sports leagues, coffee bars, concerts to attract people. Gospel is not enough anymore. Jesus is not enough anymore. You need to offer me something else, because this became boring to me. And you need to give me something new. You need to give me new dose of dopamine when I come here. And if you don't, I'm gone. Or I'll be here, but I'll be indifferent. Spiritual depth and accountability are sidelined because that's tough. And keeping attendance in high numbers and keeping everybody happy. And they say this risks creating shallow faith dependent on constant stimulation. Don't you feel, when people are leaders in church, pastors, sometimes I have a feeling that people feel they always have to do something to stimulate people, are you going to come to church? Well, I don't know if I'll come to church. Are you going to serve? Well, I don't know if I'll serve. Can you do this? Well, I don't know if I'll do that. Please. And then if you take something to do, we do it with a half heart or with the whole heart? What do you think? If somebody gives me tickets for Crvena Zvezda game in Belgrade and tickets for airplane, you don't need to motivate me and stimulate me. I'll go. I'll leave the work and go. I'll leave the family and go. Maybe take Philip with me. Right? What about church? What about church? Why is this important? Because church cannot thrive, let alone survive, if it adopts postmodern or woke cultural models in a church. Because these frameworks rest on foundations that are fundamentally opposed to the truth of gospel. So we cannot have a church that's going to function and operate well, but that operates on culture that's outside of the church. You can have something, but that's not thriving church. Or you'll have something where a certain group of people, they'll work very hard in church to make sure that everything works in church, that programs in church work very well, while the rest is just coming to consume. And then at the end, these people can get burned out very, very quickly. Why is this important? See, we are influenced by culture, whether we want to admit that or not. Everything is revolving around us. Everything. Even God. I talked to somebody recently and they were talking about persecution at the very end of times. And they said, maybe one day we'll be persecuted and physically persecuted. And I asked, maybe, I don't know, I agreed with person. Maybe that's going to happen. History showed that it can happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. But I asked them, are we persecuted today? And people say no. Well, why do I say no? I'm not persecuted. You are not persecuted. This society does not persecute you or me. Not yet. But these 4 stages, they do. If you play certain sports, if you work certain places, if you don't go with that, you can lose your job. That's persecution. And if we don't meddle in politics, the problem is that politics these days is taken upon itself to redefine morality and values that we believe in. And then we have a right to address politics. Not politically, but as a church. We shouldn't always be quiet, not aligning ourselves with any political party, but we should raise our voice. What is not right. And in order to do that, you need lots of wisdom. And I'm not always sure that we have enough of that to get engaged in that. Maybe sometimes it's better not to do anything when it comes to that. But I asked, so we are not prosecuted, but is somebody else prosecuted? They're thinking, no. See, even when we talk about persecution, it's all about us. There is a persecution if I'm persecuted. I asked the person, do you feel that Jesus is persecuted in today's culture? Well, he is. But we are not bothered. Why? Because I'm not persecuted. Again, it's about me. And then, why did I go through all of this long introduction? Because then there's a question that remains. If you still want to think about meaning and purpose, the question is, okay, so how should we live? How should we relate to all of that? How should we live? See, it's not enough to say, for a young person to say, well, I don't agree with transgenderism, therefore I'm a Christian. No, Christianity is way more than that. Way more than that. But what is it? How should we live? How should we live? You know, J.I. Packer said something, there is nothing more irreligious than self-absorbed religion. I'll repeat this. There is nothing more irreligious than self-absorbed religion. Religion that's just about me. I'm religious, but it's all about me. That's the worst. You know, okay, let's do this maybe. I'm going to try to go a bit faster. Søren Kierkegaard, you know, famous Danish philosopher who was a Christian, I think he is offering a solution for us today. What we are going through today is not necessarily new. He said there are 4 forms of being, or 4 stages of existence, or 4 modes of existence. First, he calls aesthetic stage. In this stage, the focus is on pleasure, beauty, novelty, self-indulgence, feelings. It's all about how I feel. It's, you know, I come to church, well, how did you make me feel today? You know, what's in it there for me? If you made me feel good today, I'll come next Saturday. If you did not, ciao. You know, not only church. You are married, the other person has to make, you know, you feel a certain way, and if they don't, ciao. Hedonism. People who love, enjoy art, romance, entertainment, you know, constantly new experiences, and that's where meaning is. Problem with this? See, the problem with this mode, eventually you get to the stage of despair. Because there are only so many new things. And your feelings, they change. They are not stable. And if that's source of your meaning and purpose, it's very unstable. That's why they say, psychologists say today that, you know, the young generations, these are the most anxious generations in recorded history. Even though they're not lacking basics for life. Then he says there's ethical stage. Maybe let's just stay here for a minute. Most young people are actually in this stage. Young people are in this stage of feelings. I want to feel good, you know, I want to feel positive, and there's nothing wrong with that. But see, that cannot be the primary source It cannot be the primary pillar. You know, I come to church, well, if I like everything, if you treat me guys nice, you know, and then which serious system can you sustain with concept like that? Milan worked with hydro. Can hydro system work? Can we all have power if everybody just goes based on their feelings? Look, I don't feel like getting up today, and I'm in charge of the plant over there. You know, too bad. And then, you know, something happens and, you know, city doesn't have a power. No serious system can exist on this. Impossible. And when we are younger, you are usually in this phase. And then we say, okay, he says, what's solution for this? He mentions this despair. You know, in Western culture, despair is very bad. It's very negative. Because these are negative feelings, feeling of despair. Kierkegaard says despair is very good. Very good. And he says, why is it good? Because it opens the door for a new phase of existence for you. Because when you come to the point of desperation somewhere, you know, then you understand there is something more. You know, somebody once said, talking about the pleasure, the problem with pleasure and hedonism is this. The biggest disappointment happens when something that you thought is going to give you the utmost pleasure fails you at the end. What do you do then? What do you do then? That's why young people, they go to drugs. So what do you do then? So this is not solution. We'll see feelings are important, but we'll see you cannot rely on that. Kierkegaard offers second option. Ethical stage. What is ethical stage? Ethical stage is stage when we say, you know what, it's not all about my feelings, how I feel. You need to have responsibility. You need to have duties. And you come to church because it's your duty, it's your responsibility, it's a task that you have to do. And our, you know, morality and so on, responsible citizen, good members of the church, it's more stable than the first system because it's more serious and more responsible system. And usually our older people are in this system. We remember people that came here, that sense of duty and responsibility. They built this church before they built their houses. And that's fantastic. A few weeks ago, we had a discussion at camping because usually duty is related to the task, to the rules. And our older people are usually have that kind of orientation. We say, how we define if you are a good church member? Well, we cannot see them. 10 commandments. We say we have 10 commandments. And how did we define what it means to be good Christian before? You obey commandments. You obey the rules. That's your duty. See, but the problem is if you read Apostle Paul, the commandments don't define what's good. And I don't know why we use them to define goodness. They're not there to define goodness. Paul says the law is there and commandments are there to define sin. And if you want to reduce goodness to not to sin, there is a big problem. See, commandments don't define goodness. They define sin. To be good is much more than keeping commandments. The problem with this, it's our human effort, it's a performance. You have a risk of pride, where I think I can keep that better than you, then I think more of myself. And I think sometimes with better theology, we manage to produce worse people because we produce the pride in people. Because we said it's Saturday, not Sunday. And instead of having humility when we met Jesus, we immediately got to the pride point. And we said, that's it. I understood that. I'm better than these others. I keep that. I'm a good human being. I keep Sabbath. I come here on Sabbath, but maybe I hate people. Maybe I don't care about you. See, Christianity is a completely different game. And Kierkegaard understood that. Kierkegaard understood that. See, Romans 3:20. Law is there to be conscious of a sin. Goodness is much more than that. Then he talks about third stage, religious state. And when he says religious, it doesn't mean like necessarily he implies that, but he means it's much more than just coming to church, being part of a religious group. He means that your whole being is involved in the relationship with God. It's very personal. Very personal. It's beyond feeling. It's beyond duty. It's beyond commandment. But it's what Mira was doing here with Kid's story. It ties in very nicely into sermon. What is the religious stage? He's using Abraham. He goes, you need a leap of faith for that. He goes, a faith that even, it includes reason but goes beyond reason. It's personal relationship with God. And we don't have time to go through all of that. That's the relationship that I have with God. That's the relationship that you have yourself, not through your mother and father and grandmother and who knows. It's your relationship with God that you have to build. It's your God. It's your Jesus. It's your understanding of the cross and gospel. It's what it means to you. But what God means to you. Not what church doctrine means to you. And church doctrine should help in that. And this, Paul said, we didn't do away with the law as definition of sin. But Jesus called us to much more. Strength, he goes, it's true freedom, reconciliation of self, meaning rooted in eternity and so on. He talks about these transitions from aesthetic to ethical and so on. We don't have time to go through all of that. He's using despair. And he's saying despair is very good in our life. Because it's moving us from one of these stages to another if we are willing to go. And usually we shun away despair and pain. We don't want it. J.I. Packer says that's when we are most alive. I'm going to go quickly through this because Augustine said, fear of punishment makes slaves, love of God makes children. See, when you are just in duty stage, when you are keeping the rules, you're keeping, see, that's not the point. At the end we'll get to the point where we keep the rules. But it's not through keeping the rules. It's not about rules. First John 4:19. What does it say? Why do we love? We usually think, well, I can love you if you're a lovable person if I like you. That's why I love you. No. Bible says we love because he first loved us. And this word has been cheapened up so much in English and in any language maybe. Love. I would just use the word care. I care for you because I know he cares for me. And if I don't care for you, that means I never understood who he is and that he cares for me. If you have somebody in your life that you don't care about, that means you have no clue who God is. I have no clue who God is. See Ephesians 3:17 and 19. I pray that you may have power to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses all knowledge. What does it say here? First, in John, we read that in order to love, it's not possible, if you look at John, if you look at Bible, it's not possible for us to love in biblical sense if we don't understand that we are loved by God. Impossible. What we call love, that's not love. That's liking somebody. That's different. That's not biblical love. Why don't we understand maybe this? Why we are maybe here just to get some kind of fix, or do some duty that we have here today? And Paul says in Ephesians what we read here. Notice the paradox in this verse. Notice the paradox. Paul says it's a love that surpasses the knowledge, yet he still prays that we may know it. You understand what he's doing here? You need to know this love. But once you get to know it, it surpasses that knowledge. For Paul, once love of God is known, it changes heart. Love moves person from duty-driven obedience into joyful surrenders. In Corinthians 5:14, the love of Christ compels us, Paul says. See, Paul says morality is not produced by a raw willpower or by our observation of duty, but by being grasped by divine love. Paul said, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. All my life I had such a hard time understanding, the verses. I'm going to paraphrase. We are running out of time. When Jesus said, at the end, there are two groups of people coming to him. And one group says, and he goes, go away from me, I have never known you. But they did good things. But he's telling them, go away from me, and I could never understand, why is he being so cruel? Well, you don't have to let me in. But how can you say you don't know me? I can understand I don't qualify for your place, but why do you say you don't know me? But you know what's the problem there? For these people, Jesus never became personal. It was first or second stage. They never knew him. He never became personal to them. To them, it wasn't about him. It was either about them or about duty. When Jesus says the whole law and commandments are hinged on two things: love God and your neighbor. He's saying everything still comes to this, to your relationship to me. And when we get to that point, that we are in love with Jesus, that we understand his love, his beauty, then we'll have feelings, then duty won't be a duty anymore. It's going to become a natural. Because it's all about relationship between us and him. But that relationship is much more than me coming to church and expecting something just from him to do for me. It's I'm with him because of him, who he is, not what he's going to do for me. And then for young people will sometimes say, well, but how can I experience God? How can I get to know God? I want to know God, but he's far from me. He's hiding. God is not obvious. It's hard to get to know God. And I want to read you one quote from A.W. Tozer. It's a fantastic quote. Every man is as close to God as he wants to be. Every man is as close to God as he wants to be. It's not a problem on God's side, it's on ours. When it says in Jeremiah, you will find me when? When you really want to find me. Me. When you want to find me. See, it's a person. Not it. It's not it. So, for young people, don't wait to get fixed in church. Don't wait to get the dose of dopamine in church. And this is maybe for everybody. Build your life with God when you're alone. How? Well, get on your knees and tell him, I want to know you. And do what it takes for me to learn about you. Pray. Read. Give time to God. because there is no new formulas. But our predispositions, our intent has to be different. Our motivation has to be different. We cannot live in a church and operate as culture outside thinking we are different, because maybe we are not. And the worst thing, they are using things, maybe they're using people, but we are trying to use God. We are trying to use God. And that's not the point. There is no beauty in it. Every man is as close to God as he wants to be. Amen.